Hello out there, and in front of you today is the CJRB feldspar. And before we get into anything today, guys, I have to give a quick shout out to my buddy Greg, who sent this one to me. He's also the guy who sent me the ProTech Malibu and the TRM knives that I reviewed a week or so ago. So yeah, really cool of him to send me all these knives to check out. And today's video will not be a full review. I will go through some of the details of this knife, and you will certainly get an understanding about how I feel regarding this knife. But today I just want to use this knife as an example of where I think CJRB is in the marketplace right now and how they have sort of not dominated, but they've sort of really placed themselves in a great position in terms of build quality and value. Because while I won't say that they make the best knife of all of the companies that are sort of doing the whole D2, G10, really nice action kind of thing right now, I will say that they definitely have the best prices. And so when you compare, these knives to just about everything else that you see out there, they come off very favorably. So let's talk about that. So a few years ago, when I first sort of started noticing these companies, primarily Chinese companies, that were putting out, more affordable knives with high quality materials, it was a game changer for this channel. It was a game changer for a lot of people in the community. The first knives that I remember seeing like that were Bestech's. When Bestech was using like G10 and D2 and flippers with really good action, and you were able to get them for like 50, 60 bucks, and it was super cool. And then everybody started piling on. And, for people who were used to D2 at that time and knives with this quality materials costing over $100, it was really, like I said, a game changer. And so, yeah, there was just a ton of interest. So Bestech was doing it. We already, I think, at that point had the Kaiser Vanguard series where they were using like VG10 and G10 and were making some very good knives that way as well. And then, companies like Civivi came on, which is an offshoot of WE, and CJRB later on, and also QSP now. And, there's just a lot of companies that are doing this. I don't think for a second that D2 as a whole is any less capable than it was, but it certainly has become more inexpensive. And so, the prices on these knives have been affordable for the most part. And now we're even seeing the American companies sort of jumping in with some affordable D2 options, like what Kershaw did this year with the Highball and the NORAD, and CRKT doing upgrades to like their knife, like the CEO and the Polar and the Squid and all that kind of stuff. So it's a big thing. Everybody's doing it. And again, that's a good thing. Competition helps create a better marketplace as a whole, and it also drives prices down. But what I will say is that CJRB has some of the best prices of any of these companies, and it's just really cool to see and compare how they have made themselves a niche in this marketplace. So let's really talk about that. When I started seeing these knives, and this one that I'm going to bring out first isn't in D2, but when I started seeing these knives, the first knife that I sort of used as my benchmark for everything else was this one, the Kaiser Dukes. I did that because, one, it's a really, really nice knife that's still relatively affordable, and it's a good knife. It's just really well made. It's got some features that you're not going to expect on a budget knife just in terms of the quality of this G10. It's super good looking. Nested liners, super light, really good flipping action, all the kinds of things that you would want on a nice EDC or even a gents knife. This knife, I would say, in construction and in feel, is slightly superior to the feldspar here. And it's superior in a way that it doesn't really have a measurement. I can't tell you why. Unless you have a preference for VG10, or I think this comes in N680 or 90 if you buy it now. Unless you have a preference for the steel or the grind over like, the D2, or just the colors and the look, like I can't specifically tell you why the Dukes feels like a better knife. There's just something minutia maybe in terms of the action or just how everything's dialed in or the tolerances. I'm not sure, but it does feel like a slightly better knife. That said, let's take a look at the prices. This is selling now at 69 bucks. You guys know what the price of the feldspar right here is on Amazon? Both of these on Amazon? 35 bucks. And that's what CJRB is doing, right? They're making knives that maybe aren't quite as good as their competitors. They're still really good, maybe not quite as good in my opinion, but the price difference is so remarkable that you can't ignore it. And it's hard to resist picking up a bunch of their knives. I've only managed to pick up one this year, and that's actually a win because, you know, I could have spent a couple $100s just buying a ton of them. And I got this this Rhea, and this is a $30 knife. $30 knife right here. And it's not D2, and if you care about steel, then maybe like it's gonna matter, but it's a really sweet knife for 30 bucks. And one thing, we're going to go on a quick tangent here. One thing that I really like about the feldspar, right? If you see on this Rhea, you can actually see where the liners are machined. And so you can sort of see through them. And it doesn't disrupt anything, and it doesn't make the knife look less appealing. But I don't know, actually maybe it does, because I like the fact that you don't have that on the feldspar. You have these solid liners all the way through, they're nested, but you have this just nice consistent color on the G10. The other thing about it is that even though they're not machined, maybe that saved them some money, kept prices down, but it sure didn't hurt the weight of the knife. 2.82 ounces. This knife is comparable in terms of size to a mini grip, maybe a little bit larger. Let's keep the scale. 2.61. So we've got less than a quarter of an ounce more in weight, but we have full liners going all the way down. We have a little bit longer overall profile. I mean, the weight of the knife is solid, and G10 scales versus plastic here. So, you know, so they're doing some very good things. But the comparison with the Dukes, it just like was sort of mind blowing when I noticed that. I was like, man, that is something. I mean, that is a big talking point when it comes to value. You know, and when you bring out some of the other knives and some of the other competitors, companies that are doing similar things, you know, Steel Will, this is one of my best knives for 2019. It was actually my #1 knife for 2019. And again, it still has that feel where it's a little bit more dialed in some capacity than the CJRB, but, you know, it's going to be $20-something more. And the backlash, let's talk about Civivi. Because Civivi, I think a lot of us would agree, Civivi is sort of just on another level in terms of quality. And when their knives started coming out, their first like round of knives, when they first released them, they were in like the $35 to $45 price range. I think the backlash was 40 bucks, and this one is a little bit more expensive because it has like the wooden scales, but I think that it's still in like the 40-something dollar range, right? But Civivis now are in like the high 40s, 50, 55 for some of those models. So they're sort of, you know, increasing in price as we go. And again, they're nice knives, and I can 100% understand the pricing there. But CJRB is sitting here at a price point of almost everything in their catalog. Take a look. Go to Amazon and search CJRB. Almost everything that you find is going to be $40 or less. $40 or less. And yeah, they do have the variations with like the upgrades, if it's like brass scales or copper scales or like upgraded steel or something different that are going to run in like the 50s or 60s. They have a few of those things, but their baselines across the board with like only 1 or 2 exceptions are 40 bucks or less. And we're talking about mostly like D2 steel, G10, pretty good fit and finish, good action. And it just is like a real glaring thing, because when you take a look at some of the some of the other budget knives from companies that are coming out, and I'm trying to find where I have the Kershaw Decibel right here. I mean, this is a $40 knife, and it's a great one. I love this knife, but it's ATR, and it's, you know, a stainless steel frame lock, and, you know, it doesn't have all the components that the CJRB does, and it certainly doesn't feel like as good a knife as a CJRB is. At all. It doesn't feel like it is. And the CRKT Overland, which is a pretty darn good knife for them this year, and a very successful one and a great design, again, is going to be more expensive than the feldspar, but it doesn't feel like it's as good of a knife. And so CJRB is just sort of, like I said before, just pushed itself into this one little area where I feel like the quality of the manufacturing is good enough to make it so that it almost doesn't make sense to buy anything more expensive. So if you're on a budget, this makes a ton of sense to me. Now, I've said it 1,000 times, guys. It's all about preference. It's all about the eye of the beholder. So if you were to take a look at the knives that I've shown today, and I don't know why I keep losing knives that are in this video, but all right, if you were to take a look at these knives and you were going to say, I want that Kaiser Dukes. It's a wonderful design. It's it's whatever it is that it makes it appeal to you, and I want it, but I want bang for my buck, so I'm going to buy the CJRB. I think that's a mistake, to be honest. Get the knife that you want. Spend the extra money, save the extra money. Like, you don't want to be the person who buys a knife and then a month later or 2 months later, it's like, I wish I just waited till I had an extra $20 and I got the knife that I actually really wanted to get. You don't want to be that guy. But what I am saying is, if you're just looking for an EDC, or if you're a knife addict who likes nicer things and wants to get as many of them as possible, CJRB is a great company to get on board with. And it's actually a dangerous company. It's dangerous. Like, I have to stay away from them just because it just would be easy to buy all of them. And, there's some people who save all their money and buy a $100-$200 knife. I'm one of those guys who just likes to have a lot of knives, and that's why, I end up getting a lot of more inexpensive ones, and it's just super tempting with what they're doing here, because you get a really good product, guys. A really good product for $40 or less. So I'm pretty stoked on this knife. The feldspar is a really neat all-purpose EDC, number of different color configurations, some nice little touches with the pivot collar here, and the deep carry pocket clip, and the level of polish. I'm just really impressed with it overall. Nice stonewash on the blade too. Not too much like blade stamping and billboarding. There's really a lot of boxes being checked here, guys, with this knife, and that can really go the same with everything else that I've seen from CJRB. A lot of boxes being checked. So that's just my take on it. This could change real quickly, because the marketplace does tend to shift, and people tend to do things to try to be more competitive. And so who knows what the landscape will be in another year. But for now, CJRB has a pretty strong hold on the combination of value and quality. That balance there is really in stride with what they're putting out. All right, guys, I was watching this video in the editing process, and I realized that there was one brand that I haven't talked about that I'm sure will be coming up a lot in the comments when it comes to bang for your buck and just value and quality for the price. And obviously, I am talking about ganzo. And I've had a number of ganzos over the past few years. I thought it was pretty interesting when when they were just like stealing designs, what they were doing with the axis lock and that sort of thing. And I've said a few very negative things about their knives, and there were some things I really didn't like. But I also liked beating up on those knives, and they made a pretty decent product, even though there were some things about them that I didn't appreciate on the company level. What I really like, though, is that they seem to have progressed past all that. And, I've decided personally that, I'm going to judge them based on what they're doing now. And that's why this knife got really high marks last year. And I was willing to, pick up one of their new collaborations for 2020, and judge the knives as they are. Some reviewers won't do that. Some people won't give them the time of day and will not even look at one of their knives. But, I certainly do, and I appreciate a good knife when I have it. This company, though, is not really in this conversation for me, because I don't consider them competitors to the CJRBs and the Kaisers and the Civivis. That isn't to say that they don't make a very good knife, and that isn't to say that, if you're looking at just spending a small amount of money, that maybe, since the quality between some ganzos and some CJRBs isn't that different, you save a $10 bill and get a ganzo, that may not be a bad call. But for me personally, a ganzo has never been a this or that kind of decision. It's never been instead of. It's always been in addition to, if that makes sense. I've been looking at knives and I've thought, man, I'd like to get this Kaiser, or I'd like to get this QSP or a CJRB, and you choose one of those things to get. But that's how it works with my money. With a ganzo, it's always, I'm just going to get that too, if that makes sense. So the ganzo is just an additional thing. In my mind, it's not a competitor, because I'm not going to not get one of those other knives because I'm getting a ganzo. That's not going to be the same for everybody. And some people might look at that as a cop-out. But just the price point of the ganzos and the way that those are, I don't look at them the same way. And maybe that will change over the course of time. Maybe maybe once they really get established and they've had a little bit more time, and I'm more used to them being a company that I can really trust. I don't know, maybe that'll change the game, but as it is, I just don't see them the same way. So take with that what you will. I just wanted to bring up the Ganzo company because certainly I will freely and happily admit that they make a pretty darn good product at a price that's even better in most cases than the CJRBs. All right, guys, let me know your thoughts. Who's better if I'm wrong here? What do you really think about this? How do you feel about CJRB? What's your favorite CJRB? Which one would you like to see on the channel next? Let me know. Any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions apart from that, let me know about that as well. I appreciate you watching. One more thanks to Greg. I'll talk with you later, guys. Have a good one.